Folks, when it comes to faith, have you ever noticed that the people we point to when it comes to our examples of faith, they're people who are so, not average? Have you noticed this? When it comes to faith, the people we generally compare ourselves to are sort of the spiritual bravehearts, if you will. People boldly serving God, and daily they're encouraging others to do the same. They are the sort of Bill and Melinda Gates Christians, people who generously give thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to the church's ministries. We compare ourselves to the Captain America saints in our church. Those who seem to do everything. They sing in the choir. They lead Sunday school. They're on the church council. These are the examples that we can compare our faith to. But here's my question. What if your faith is just more, average? I mean, what if you've never dreamed of turning the world upside down for God? Does that make you less of a Christian? Hey everybody, welcome to session 2 of our 5-part series called Faith for the Rest of Us. And I need to start by sharing an apology, an apology on behalf of all pastors, church leaders, and overzealous Christians who have ever made you feel as though your faith is less than adequate. You see, friends, far too often, here's what happens. Well-meaning church leaders, far too often, whether they would admit it out loud or not, they think that something is sort of spiritually wrong with average Christians. Now, you know who I'm talking about. They're those Christians who come to church every now and then, but they never take on a leadership role. Honestly, this is the vast majority of Christians. They're people who love Jesus, have a great relationship with God, but for whatever reason, they just don't get involved in the local church. This might be you. And you might say, I'm just not the leadership type. Well, far too often, church leaders, they project their passion for their work onto everyone else around them. And let's be honest, it's well-intentioned. They're clearly convicted that they assume that everyone who doesn't share the same passion they do must not know God very well, or at the very least, they must not be listening to what God is saying very well. Now, you're smart enough. You know this is a problem. It's such a flawed way of looking at Christianity. The truth is, there's room in the kingdom for average Christians. There's room for mediocrity. Now, here's the truth we don't want to admit. Our aversion to mediocrity, to being average, comes more from our American achievement-oriented culture than anything God expects of us. God doesn't have a problem with average, but we Americans, we sure do. You see, God doesn't call everyone to be a hill-charging spiritual warrior. In fact, I think God has a special place in his heart for simple folks who love God, love their family and friends, and then die without ever doing anything outstandingly significant. People who quietly and unobtrusively love God and live out the love with those around them. As Americans, though, we believe we can do anything or be anything if we just set our minds to it, if we want it badly enough and are willing to pay a price for it. Christians too often take this part of our American ethos and we place it over faith, and suddenly we assume nothing is impossible when it comes to faith. Nothing should be impossible when it comes to your faith. Paul said, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you, after all. Friends, there are so many wonderful people with integrity, people who are obedient to God's word, who simply don't have the gift for leadership. That doesn't make you any less a Christian. I'm struck by something I recently realized about the early church of the Bible. When we look at the stories of that guy named Paul, who started more churches than anyone else in the New Testament, the vast majority of the people Paul led to Jesus And the vast majority of the people in the churches he planted, they never became leaders or joined Paul in starting other churches. They were farmers and merchants. They were mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, people whose lives were forever changed by the story of Jesus, but they lived it out in humble and quiet ways. So would you do this? Would you consider a couple of questions? Are you prone to confuse our American idealism with Christianity and see some Christians, by their lack of engagement, as sort of second-class Christians? Or are you someone who has never stepped up to be a leader because God gifted you in different ways, quieter, more supportive ways, but you felt guilty in the past for not stepping up?